please stand? And you may be seated.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Wilma Maxine Martin passed from this life on January 14, 2019, in Marlow, Oklahoma. Maxine was born July 30th, 1923, in Comanche, Oklahoma, to Bill and Merle Peck. She grew up in Comanche and graduated from Comanche High School in 1941. She met Jess Potts in California, and they were married on May 23rd, 1945. They were married 34 years until his death in April 1978, living part of that time in Comanche, Oklahoma, and part of the time in various towns in California, including Ventura and Thousand Oaks. They had 2 children, Claudia and Calvin. She met her second husband, Oris Martin, in Marlow, and they were married on September 22nd, 1979. They were married 31 years and continued to live in Marlow until his death in December of 2010. Maxine loved being a housewife. She worked various jobs to supplement the family's income when needed, but what she really excelled in was being a wonderful wife, a mother, and a homemaker. She loved her family, and one of her joys was making birthdays, anniversaries, and any holiday a special celebration for her family, and with good cooking and baking. She enjoyed playing dominoes and challenged her husband Oris to a game every night after supper. She was a gifted writer and a poet, and one of her stories was actually published in a book a few years later, which I'll be reading to you in just a moment. She especially enjoyed writing and receiving long letters and appreciated so much those who continued to write to her, even when she could no longer write in return, namely these nieces, Billy Ann Ivy, Elva Gentry, and Alvina Sally. For years, Maxine attended monthly meetings as an invited guest to the 49ers, which is a group of women who graduated Comanche High School in 1949. Maxine was a faithful member of First Baptist Church of Marlow. For many years, she was an active member of the Faith Sunday School class and rarely missed classes or any monthly parties. She served as class secretary and reporter. She loved her church and especially her Sunday school class. She was also a member of the WMU, and she will be remembered for her sweet spirit and her friendly smile. Survivors include daughter and her husband, Claudia and Truman Cox of Marlow, son Calvin Potts of Comanche, granddaughter and her husband, Jesse and Chris Ginn of Marlow, a grandson and his wife, David and Beth Cox of Duncan, grandson Jeremy Potts of Cumming, Georgia, great-grandchildren Anthony Cox, Alyssa Cox, Ashton Cox, Tori Mackey, and her husband Blue, and Tristan Ginn, and great-great-grandchildren Bella and Gray Mackey. She's also survived by stepsons James Martin and his wife Anita of Bossier City, Louisiana, and Wayne Martin and his wife Carolyn of Davis, and numerous step-grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. She's also survived by a brother and his wife, Ronnie and Janet Peck of Duncan, sister-in-law Cleta Peck of Duncan, sister-in-law Wanell Potts of Comanche, and numerous nieces, nephews, and cousins. She was preceded in death by her parents, Bill and Merle Peck, and husbands Jess Potts and Oris Martin, brother Bill Peck, and stepdaughter Doris Martin. The scripture that I think is most appropriate in description of a lady of character and stature of Maxine is found in 2 Timothy 4, 7, and 8. It says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a cross of righteousness, a crown of righteousness, which is the Lord, the righteous judge. He shall give me at that last day, and not only to me, but unto them also that love his appearing. Which also I believe that upon her approach to the Lord at the time of death, Matthew 25:21 would be appropriate for Maxine, in which the Lord says, well done, a good and faithful servant. This story that she wrote and had contributed to a book is very fascinating. It really tells all of her life in summary. It's very interesting. It says, and I'm quoting from Maxine, I was born July 1923 in Comanche, Oklahoma, at my home in the country. Our family doctor delivered me and also my baby brother 4 years later. This all happened during the Depression, and money was scarce. My dad was a farmer, and he raised most of our food. We didn't have electricity or running water. We used wood to heat with and also to do our cooking. We had a cow, chickens, 2 horses for Dad to use when he plowed the farm. Mother helped Daddy in the field, and he liked to keep all the weeds out of it. Mother also canned food, and she'd put it in the dirt cellar so we would have enough food through the winter. It would not freeze in the cellar. I went all through grade school at the country school about 2 miles from where I lived. I would walk with other children and go to and from school. I remember I didn't want to go to school, and I would cry as I was being bullied by a boy who threatened to cut my ears off. He'd get out his pocket knife, and I don't know why I didn't tell my parents, but I guess I had a fear of my dad getting mad and doing something I wouldn't want. And since this boy was rather tall, I guess he graduated and he wasn't there anymore. I remember one teacher that broke a ruler over my head, and I believe it was because I was talking. She made one girl put gum on her nose and stand in front of the class. At least I didn't have to do that. It was so embarrassing for her to have to do that. I wonder what her parents thought about it. Since we didn't have electricity, we had a radio that ran off a battery. I remember wondering what the people looked like. Yes, we had kerosene lamps, to use for light. I remember Mother curling my hair by heating the curling iron and put it on top of the globe of the lamp. When Saturday came, my brother and I would go to the movies. Daddy would give us a dime each, and that's all it cost. We looked forward to our Saturdays, and it seemed to be a big day for everyone. It's when people bought their weekly groceries. Also, people sold cream and butter from their cows. The streets were full of cars, and people were sitting in them visiting each other. I remember being with one of the girls and walking up and down in front of the stores. When storms came at night, we'd get up and go to the cellar. Daddy would sit by me up the stairs holding a rope that was on the cellar door. He always liked to tease me and tell me there was a snake crawling on me. He laughed when he saw that it scared me. Now, I wonder why he did that. I know he loved me, but didn't realize what he was doing to me. My little brother used to love to go to our neighbor's lady's house, and as she would give him sugar cookies that she had baked, one day, as we were walking over to the house to visit, Mother told him, "Billy, if you ask for cookies today, I'm going to spank you." Well, he had been there a little while, and the lady had not offered him a cookie. So I guess he stood it as long as he could until he sniffed and said, "Seems to me like I smell cookies." It really tickled the neighbor lady, but it embarrassed Mother. One time, our family went to an evening service at the church. When we got home, it was dark, so Daddy was lighting the kerosene lamp, and we heard the groaning coming from another room. It scared us, and I said to Mother, "Come on, let's go," as I was ready to run away. It happened to be my male cousin from Texas. He had come in. We didn't lock our doors back then, and he laid down on the bed and gone to sleep. He laughed and talked about it for a long time. Times really have changed, as we wouldn't dare leave our doors unlocked now. I've enjoyed recalling all these wonderful happenings in my life. And as I said, she was also a poet. And right now we have her grandson. No? No great. Not great, just grandson. Will come and read a poem for us.
Looking Back by Maxine, 1980. As I think back to my childhood days, such good memories come to mind of Dad and Mother and all their ways they had been so wonderful and kind. I grew up in a country home, for this I am glad. I never thought from it I'd roam. To think of that made me so sad. I didn't have a sister to love, but I had a little brother. I thank the Lord above for sending him to Dad and Mother. When my brother was born, I was just 4 years old. I stayed with my aunt that morn until the good news I was told. I was happy as could be when I received the word, for I couldn't hardly wait to see what had been brought by that old bird. I asked if I could hold him in my arms for just a minute or two, but I wanted to protect him from all the harm, so I gave him back to you as good as new. As my brother was growing up, he'd like to tease, and I'd let him have the new cup, and I tried my best to please. If in the box of oatmeal there would be a new dish, I'd let him have it to fill, as I knew it was his wish. But then he had a certain way of twisting his mouth with glee. And I've got the new dish, he'd say. Then he'd say, tiddly-dee-dee. Daddy would bring home from town a big nickel sack of candy. Piece by piece, I divided on down. When dividing, I was pretty handy. Mother would do such nice things for my brother and me. She'd make us toys, and she'd sing, and have a nice place under the tree. Our mom knew just how to make our days happy and complete. In the oven, she would bake some cookies for us to eat. Daddy was once a bakerman, such good things he could bake. He could flip donuts up in the pan and make cookies, pies, and pretty cakes. Daddy soon quit baking pies and started farming land. He found that more happiness lies in growing things in the sand. He knew just how to grow a garden you would like to see. Not a single weed in sight, every row as straight as can be. He liked his fields real clean. We had to hoe every weed in sight. I thought then he was being mean, but left up to me, oh, what a fright. Mother liked to work by Daddy's side. They raised good things to eat. They were known far and wide. Their vegetables couldn't be beat. Daddy peddled his melon sweet. He gave everyone a good deal. When customers came down the street, how good he had made them feel. He didn't ask a big price for the things that he sold. His customers didn't have to think twice, for his words were as good as gold. I didn't think farming work was much fun. I'd rather clean house and cook. I had to get a headache from the hot sun, and I couldn't help how I might look. I used to walk to school each day, in summer and winter too. Almost 3 miles, I would say. It was nice when the skies were blue. School was all right, and my teachers I'd please, but some mornings I'd leave home in tears, for there was a big boy that liked to tease, and he took out his knife and threatened to cut off my ears. I played basketball in grade school, and I enjoyed it very much. When I graduated, Mother made a rule, no more wearing shorts and such. Mother liked to sew for me, my closet full to stay. I would ask her constantly, Mother, what should I wear today? Returning from my first date, and proud that the time wasn't late, my brother met me and asked real loud, Mac, how was your date? Together, my girlfriend and I sang. We could harmonize real good. We thought we were a bang to feel confident, and we thought we should. On the piano, her mother would play all the latest tunes that we knew. South of the border, down Mexico way, and our favorite one, Just for You. Mother would make good pies from the berries that we grew. She liked the glow in her eyes when the table we flew. We stored our canned food each year in a dirt cellar in the ground. My brother and I would go down in fear. We'd see a snake and our hearts would pound. We had a car and it was full of gas in the tank, but sometimes it was hard to start. Dad would have to crank and crank. I would be praying with all my heart. On Saturday evenings, we tore off to town. We would go. It was something everyone did. We had a dime to see the show. We could see a Western for a dime. John Wayne was my favorite star. There was a serial every time, also a comedy with Three Stooges, best by far. Saturday was a good time when people got together. We'd all drink a cherry lime. It was good in hot weather. Girls in those days, including me, would walk up and down the street. People sat in their cars to see how you were dressed and if you looked neat. When graduation time came that day, I was happy but a little sad. Now that classmates might go away to seek their future, some good, some bad. I am thankful I had a Christian home, so many didn't have one like me. They would be somewhere to roam, not knowing the Lord or where they would be. It wasn't long until we found out some more surprising news. A new arrival was to come about, a brother or sister to chase away the blues. The new arrival was a baby boy. He was made us happy as could be. Caring for him was such a joy. God knew we needed him, you see. He was so much company to Mom and Dad when my brother and I were gone. He made us feel so very glad that he was there when we were not alone. I worked as a waitress for a while, but the pay wasn't much, so I decided in style I'd work as aircraft plant and such. I didn't mind the work so bad. I roamed with my girlfriend in the city. It was hard leaving Mother and Dad, but there wasn't any job, which was a pity. I bought some pretty clothes to wear, and I found ways to spend my money, but I wasn't happy and I couldn't bear to stay there without my honey. My boyfriend wasn't around anymore. Into the Navy he had gone. I received letters from him galore, but I still felt alone. I quit my job and went back home to California. My brother was to go. My girlfriend and I decided to roam. We left our parents feeling mighty low. I got a job in a cafe across the street from a certain little barber shop. There worked a man I was to meet, and the distance was just a skip and a hop. We hit it right off from the start. He was from Oklahoma, too. Both of us were lonely apart from our loved ones and the people we knew. We went together for a while, and soon we loved each other. God and I traveled many miles and hated leaving Dad and Mother. In Phoenix, Arizona, we wed. A telegram was sent to Mother and Dad. It's Mr. and Mrs. is all it said, and I'm sure it made them feel pretty sad. God sent us a baby girl to love. She made us so happy and glad. She was Daddy's angel from above. He couldn't have whipped her if she'd been bad. In a few years, we were filled with joy. Another baby we were sent. God sent us a healthy baby boy, just what we wanted, and from God he was sent. We had a lot of good times together. We moved quite a bit here and there. We would go west in cooler weather. I'd get homesick, and homeward we would tear. It was hard to live so far away from Dad and Mother and brother. I would write letters home and say, I miss you, and then I'd write another. There's a lot of sickness over the years, but the Lord was with us every day. A lot of happiness and a lot of tears. Friends and loved ones would help along the way. When one gets older and looks back, they can see what the Lord has done. No matter if you live in a mansion or a shack, he'll treat you the same if your heart is what he's won. Our daughter fell in love several times, but a certain one sent by God above came along, and she did fall in love. Guess it was love at first sight. We were glad he was from our state. This way she wouldn't be taking a flight so far away to find her mate. They soon found they'd have to be apart for a while, which made them sad. The army called, and it broke their hearts. He'd have to fight, and he wasn't even mad. They had to be apart for 1 year. Overseas he had to go. She missed the one she held so dear and looked forward to his furlough. The day came when they were wed, so happy they were together. They thought of dreams they'd had, and now their nest they'd feathered. Our son found someone that set his heart awhirl. They fell in love in the California sun, and he thought she was quite a girl. They decided soon that they would marry, so off to Vegas they sped. In just a few hours, they were wed. Our first grandchild came to our daughter and son-in-law, a sweet little girl, Jessie, her name, and now we are grandpa and grandma. In the years were filled with joy. We were blessed with another grandchild. David was born. Our son-in-law got his boy. Saying that he was proud was putting it mild. In just a few months, another grandchild was born. Our son and daughter-in-law had a baby boy named Jeremy. We were also blessed when he arrived that morn. Everyone's heart was filled with glee. We enjoyed our children so much. We had good and comfortable life. Except for the sickness and such, we never knew any strife. There were valleys deep when my husband's life was low, but God saw fit for me to keep him longer, and his love he did show. My husband's wish was to live to see his children grow, and that wish God did give, and not just his children alone. His three grandchildren, too, he was blessed to see, and how much he knew how God can be. He loved us all very much, and we loved him so. But God's plan for him was such that he called, and he had to go. 2 years have gone by, but I am not alone. You see, someone nice caught my eye, and he offered me his home. I remembered after my husband was gone, something he had told me at times we'd share, to marry again and not to live alone if I could find someone for which I could care. So this new loved one asked me one day if I would be his wife. I thought it over and decided to say yes, and with him I'll spend the rest of my life.
On behalf of the family, thank you for being here today to encourage them and to remember with them. Your presence is important and your encouragement is necessary, so thank you for being here. We gather today to do a difficult thing. It is a necessary thing. It is the right thing, but it is nonetheless difficult. Although we as Christ followers know that this is not goodbye, but instead it is see you later, it's still a hard thing. But the reality is, even with that knowledge, our hearts still hurt a bit. Our spirits are somewhat heavier, and our eyes are a little more leaky than normal. It can be hard stuff. But the truth is, without Jesus, this would be unbearable stuff, because if he were not in the great big middle of all of this, there would absolutely be no hope. And friends, if there is no hope, then the future is absolutely horrible. And this would necessarily then be a very sad, grievous goodbye. But thankfully today we don't have to do this without Jesus. And one of the reasons we don't have to do it without Jesus is Maxine was a Christ follower. She was saved when she was 14 years old at a Brush Arbor meeting in Comanche. And here, I didn't even know Jesus would go down to Comanche. Because Maxine was saved, she was born again, she was a Christian. When she took her last breath of air on this earth, there in the nursing home, her very next breath filled her lungs with the sweet air of heaven. And she immediately found herself healthy and whole and more full of life than she had ever experienced, and I would say more full of life than we can even imagine. So I thought I might spend just a bit of time, just a couple of minutes this morning, talking about her life from the day of her salvation until the day of her homegoing. There is a particular verse in the book of Romans chapter 8 that I want to share with you. The Bible would say this to us this morning, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his promise. I want you to think about those words for a moment. That all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. Now, quite honestly, when you think about this verse in relationship to what we're doing here today, when you think about this verse in relationship to the life that Maxine lived, it almost looks like a miss, doesn't it? It looks like something is wrong. After all, this verse says that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. A part of the problem of this verse that we have before us today, based upon what we do here today, is that it promises good. I have no doubt that there are a lot of folks who would have a hard time seeing any good in what we're doing here today. Here's what I'd say to you. The reality is this wasn't just good for Maxine. It was the best for Maxine. It's not just that God did what was good for her, but instead he did what was best for her. She had struggled so long with sickness and ailment that not only took away her physical strength, but also her mental acuity. And the last weeks of her life were most difficult. So it was best for her to go home to Jesus. It was best for her to escape the body that had failed her so miserably and fly away to Jesus. It really was best for her. And with that said, I want to make sure that you know that this verse doesn't say that everything is good. For the Bible to say that everything is good would make the Bible a lie. And friends, the Bible does not, cannot, will not lie. The reality is there are some things in life that are not good. There are some things in life that are hard. There are some things in life that are just bad. This verse doesn't say that everything is good. Instead, what it says is that God is able to work all things together for good. God is able to take everything in your life, all the things that he's allowed in your life, and somehow stir them up and make good come out of them. Now, as Ron mentioned, we talked about at the home earlier this week, Maxine loved to cook and especially loved to bake her layer cakes that I'm told she put together with toothpicks. And if you got a piece of cake with a toothpick in it, it was like the victory lap. You got to go kiss the cook is what I'm told. So I want you to think about Maxine's baking ability and and how that would help her understand this verse in a very practical way. This verse says that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord, that God is able to take everything that he allows in our lives and stir it up and bring good out of it. Well, think about this with me for a moment. Imagine Maxine preparing to bake a cake and putting all of the ingredients out on the counter necessary for the baking of the cake. Now, if you expect me to give you a list of ingredients, that's not going to work. I don't understand all that. My ingredients would be a cake mix and whatever you mix in it, and I don't even know what that would be. But Maxine would know. She would know. And imagine all of these ingredients laid out on the counter. And the reality is, if you went by and tasted most of those ingredients that were laid out on the counter, most of them wouldn't taste good. Imagine getting a handful of flour, and it's not going to be good. Those things individually are not good. That you would say to yourself, man, that tastes bad. That tastes bad. How could these things that taste so bad turn into something so good? But the reality is, when a good cook like Maxine mixed all of that up in the right portion and baked it at the right temperature for the right amount of time, family, you can amen me, the result will be something very good, right? It would be good. Let me tell you, if Maxine knew how to do that, then how much more does God know how to do that? You see, God knows exactly how much to allow into your life, and he knows how to take everything that he allows in your life and to mix it up and apply just the right amount of heat so that it all comes out good. Isn't that amazing? Now, Maxine just didn't know that practically as a cook and as a baker. She lived that principle. You know her, you know that she was convinced that regardless of what was going on, that God was going to work it out for the best. She believed that whatever happened was part of God's plan and that he was more than able to bring good out of it. I think that's one of the reasons that Maxine lived by the golden rule. She treated others the way that she wanted to be treated. And you know what? That created a lot of good. A lot of good for a lot of people. The reality is this: for as long as I had the privilege of knowing Maxine, I never heard her say a bad word about anybody. And I don't think I ever heard anybody say a bad word about Maxine. I know you're sitting out there, you think that a preacher standing behind a pulpit like this talking about the deceased is supposed to say things like that, right? We preachers are supposed to get a license to stretch the truth just a little bit or ignore part of it and say good things about the person that's gone on to be with Jesus. We all kind of expect that. We nod our heads knowingly when that happens. I'm just going to tell you, I ain't lied yet. Not about Maxine anyway. I never knew her to say a bad word about it. And I certainly never heard a bad word about it. When we were visiting with family, Ron and I were there just the other day. It was interesting as we were talking about Maxine and the life that she lived, really how similar the descriptions were of Maxine. Not only from the kids, but brothers, and grandkids, and just the whole family. They all just kind of saw her the same way. And as they were talking about here are the words that I heard. Words like gentle and happy and smiling and sweet and kind and generous and joyful and gracious were used. It kind of sounded like someone was trying to describe me when you put all those together. But in reality, they were talking about Maxine. And the reality is she really was that way. Every time I saw her on Sunday, and that was a lot of Sundays. Some would say too many. Every time I saw her on all of those Sundays, she was in church. And even most recently when she was in the nursing home, there was always that smile on her face. I don't think I ever saw the lady that she didn't have that smile. And there was that gleam in her eye. And as I told the family earlier this week, there was always that two-handed handshake that I will never forget. Her right shoulder, she thought, didn't work real well. I think Jesse proved to her it worked as well as her left shoulder, but that's a whole other story. when you would reach to shake hands with Maxine, she would grab her right hand with her left hand and use her left hand to extend it to you. And she and I shook hands like that a million times. And I will never forget all those things. She sat over in the big room, and if you want to go with me, I'll go show you where she sat. She's a good Southern Baptist. She sat in the same place every Sunday. Just in case the rapture comes, she wanted the Lord to know where she was. And I'd come by, and there would be that smile, that gleam in her eye, and that reach. And we'd shake hands. We might talk a bit. We might just say good morning. But I will always remember that. I will always. She really was that way. She really was. She always seemed genuinely glad to see me. I don't know if she was genuinely glad, but she sure seemed that way to me. Because every time I walked away from her, I thought, you know what, she kind of likes me. But I can assure you that I was always genuinely glad to see her. One more thing the family told me. That is, when you went to visit Maxine and you got ready to leave, she would stand in the door, not in an attempt to get you out of the house, but she would stand in the door and watch you drive away. She would watch until you were out of sight. Isn't that an interesting habit? You know, the reality is sometimes when the families come to visit, nothing looks better than taillights. We've all got those folks at our family, so seeing the taillights sometimes is a pretty good sight. But the only reason those taillights are a good sight is you got some notion that they're going to come back to see you, that they'll be back, and you'll get to be together again. You know, family, this time, what we're dealing with is Maxine is left to go home. Kind of like you're standing in the doorway, watching the taillights. And the reality is, that would be unbearable if it were not for the fact that one day you're all going to be back together. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we read that love is patient. So was Maxine. Love is kind. So was Maxine. Love does not envy or boast, and I don't think she did any of that. Love is not arrogant. She certainly wasn't. Love is not rude. I never knew her to be rude. Love does not insist on its own way. Never heard that from her. It is not irritable or resentful. Never experienced that. Love does not rejoice at wrongdoing. I never heard her do that. But love rejoices in the truth, and I saw her do that on Sundays when the truth was preached. Love bears all things. She bore a lot in her life. Love believes all things. She does that. Love hopes all things and endures all things. Love never ends. You know, the truth is this. The only way that those things could be true about Maxine is because Jesus lived in her when she lived on this earth. Today, Jesus doesn't live in her anymore. The reality is she lives with him. She lived her life by faith. Today, she exists by sight. She has seen her Savior. Father God, we are grateful for today. Thank you, Father, for doing what was best for Maxine. Even though, Father, in our eyes and in our heart, we might question that a bit and wonder about that a bit and roll it around some trying to make sense out of it, God, may we just know that it was what's best for her. Because, God, you've got a long history of doing what's best for your children. In Jesus' name.